Oh, hello, Paul. I got your message.
Richard, this is Giles, the renowned scientist author.
Oh, another writer. Maybe one of you should have written this sketch.
I don't believe it.
Why are you looking at me like that?
It's incredible. It's a marvellous job. Who did it?
Well, it's adequate. But the question is not so much who, my dear fellow, as why.
I'm a writer. I leave the editing and promotion to others.
Very wise of you, old chap.
Now look, I don't know what all this is about, but I must...
Restrain him!
What do you want me to do with him?
Well, we can't have him podcasting all over the Hooniverse. Disassemble him. We can cannibalize him for parts.
What parts? Now, wait a minute.
I should like to keep the accent. It really is quite remarkable.
Well, if I make a cut here, you can have the flat vowels.
Excellent.
Look, far be it from me to query this fellow's competence, but where I come from, if you cut out the patient's voice, it's going to make a very dull podcast.
Wait, is it capable of independent thought?
I didn't think so. Better check the brain.
Looks quite organic, and the ego's rather swollen.
Well, what did you expect from a podcast host?
Extraordinary. If I didn't know better, he's real.
What?
Brilliant!
Well, you can keep your accent for now. But the Missing Episodes podcast is about to reach the Dodo stories, so we might need it for about half an episode.
Hello, and welcome to Something Who Podcast, episode 32. I'm Richard, and after the excitement of our live show a few weeks ago, once again we're back with our classic format. And in this episode, we're swashing our buckle in a huge way, with 4th Doctor story The Androids of Tara, followed by 12th Doctor story Robot of Sherwood. And we're also back with our classic lineup, Paul and Giles.
Thank you very much. Wow.
Yeah, I missed the live one. Would have been fun to take part.
Yeah, well, I mean, don't worry too much because I think we're going to come back with another one fairly shortly.
Yeah.
God, are we?
And we might even have a bit more participation. Well, I mean, in the sense that we might actually look at more at what our live audience is saying and maybe take some topics from them next time.
I looked at what they were saying last time. It was it was frightening. I'm not doing that again.
A stream of unmitigated filth.
Okay, so let's get cracking, which means first up, looking at Androids of Tara, which is the 4th story in season 16. It's part of the season-long Key to Time arc, as I'm sure every single one of our listeners already knows. Written by David Fisher, directed by Michael Hayes, and yeah, first time I'd seen this in approximately 42 years, so quite an interesting watch.
Approximately.
Yeah.
Well, good. Perhaps it'll encourage you to watch more Doctor Who. I know that's not something you enjoy, as a rule. It's something you try very hard to avoid.
Yeah. Well, we've had that discussion, haven't we, that I'm a bit of a meta fan. I seem to spend more of my time watching, reading and listening to things about Doctor Who than actually watching the show itself. So, yeah, maybe that is a lesson to me. And
that you switched off in the Graham Williams era because you're becoming a teenager and thought it was too silly, like Adrian Mole. That was basically it, wasn't it? I know that's not what you said, but that's what I choose to believe, and I'm hanging on to that.
I think it's very, very accurate, yeah. So Giles, did you remember this story, Androids of Tara, from its original showing or from maybe later on?
I have very vague memories of it. I remember the bits when they're trying to get into the tunnels to get to the coronation. That stuck with me. As for some reason that particular bit lingered in my memory. I probably saw most of it at the time, but I think I mostly kind of remember it from it being one of the sagas that I read,
right,
and reread fairly compulsively, just because I rather enjoyed it as a good ripping yarn kind of thing. And then shortly after that, I discovered the Prisoner of Zenda itself, and then read and reread that as well. And I think, did Barry and Terence do a Sunday Tea Time Classics Prisoner of Zenda sometime relatively soon, and like maybe early to mid 80s?
It's very easy to believe it, but I can't confirm or deny it.
Oh, there we go. This is going to be one of our classic cases of doing our research on the fly.
You look it up while I'm telling the world my memories of Andrew Tatara. But I warn you, you won't have long. I would definitely have watched this, but I don't have any memories of it from the time. If you want to know, you don't, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I remember some of the spooky visuals of the Reboss operation. I remember Kroll. He's quite hard to forget when you're at an impressionable age. But as much as I enjoy this story now, it didn't really linger in my imagination as a child. I guess I was all about the science fiction. I never really very interested in swashbuckling as a nipper.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say similar, to be honest. I was, about 10 or 11 when this came on. And so I have quite strong memories of the Key to Time season, but not anything particular about this one. I mean, I remembered it well enough. Like you, Giles, I'd read the book at some time afterwards as well. Was it David Fisher who wrote it, or was it Terence Dicks?
David Fisher. Oh, the book was Terence Dicks, I'm pretty sure.
Terence Dicks, yeah.
Right. Because David Fisher did write Targets eventually, didn't he? Am I right?
He did. I think this might have been the era when... I don't want to libel anybody, but there was definitely an era when it was alleged Target didn't actually bother contacting the original authors because they just assumed Terence would be happy to do all of them. And I think it changed when one author discovered they hadn't been contacted and said, well, hang on, I would have done that.
Right.
I can't remember who it was. Perhaps it was David Fisher because he started eventually. I think he started with Creature from the Pit.
Right.
And did that and Leisure Hive.
And then hasn't he gone back and subsequently done his own version of Stones of Blood for audio?
Absolutely. That was quite a novel. Oh no, I don't. No pun intended, but that was quite a novelty.
Yeah.
He didn't do Enter Tatara again, did he?
No, that's as far as I know. Anyway, I have confirmed that it was 84. And it had Jonathan Cheekbones Morris from Snake Dance.
Oh yes.
Oh, that one.
Yes, and from Bread, I believe, if I remember rightly.
Yes.
Yeah, as Rupert of Hentzau in it. So yeah.
I'm glad that you are very familiar with The Prisoner of Zenda because I hadn't read it as a child, and in fact I didn't really read it until about 10 years ago or so. And it hasn't lodged, so I will not be in a position to discuss the similarities and differences, but you can. Well done. Dr. Literature.
Oh, blimey.
Yeah, I imagine that I'm having to rest on my memories of the Barry Letts and Terence Dicks version, which is so strong that I couldn't even really remember whether they did it or not. So,
surely Douglas Fairbanks Jr. would have been more your period, Richard.
Now, has anyone done any research about the behind the scenes, the reason this even exists? Because David Fisher has come back to write a second story on the trot.
Yes.
Now, was that planned, or was it because he made such a great job of Stones of Blood they immediately rushed him back? You wouldn't think that was... I mean, I know TV was done at a different pace in those days, but you wouldn't have thought...
No, it's sort of rather...
There was that much flexibility in the schedule. But then again, they did the same with Chris Boucher, two in a row.
I have done a little research. I don't want to tread on anyone's toes, but at least as far as reading the
stamp all over mine. I've done nothing.
At least as far as reading the production subtitles and then thinking, well, that's a bit funny, and it is a bit funny, and I can't make out there's slightly contradictory things, and I can't work out which one is right. So allegedly, this slot was going to be I'm trying to remember the sequence of events here. This slot was going to be the Ted Lewis story. So Graham Williams knew Ted Lewis of Get Carter, Jack's Return Home / Get Carter, and various other incredibly gritty and grim 1970s crime novels from they'd worked on Z-Cars together. And for some reason this convinced Williams that tapping up Ted Lewis to write a Doctor Who would be would be a good idea. And this, the rather marvellous coincidence is that apparently he and Anthony Reid and Ted Lewis got together and had a chat about Doctor Who story ideas. And the idea they came up with was, well, wouldn't it be interesting if you met someone from history and they weren't all they were cracked up to be? And the concept that they settled on was meeting Robin Hood and finding out that he was a villain. And I can't find out anything more about the actual nature of the story that was going to be built around that, except that the script that was then produced was, or that I think Lewis got through 3 episodes of, was going to be called The Doppelgangers, which kind of suggests that this would have been treading on the same toes as the concept that we eventually got, you might think. Playing around with doubles and things like that.
Yeah.
And then Ted Lewis was, frankly, I think his marriage was breaking up and he had a drink problem and didn't turn stuff in and then turned up drunk to a meeting, and that relationship came to a fairly shuddering halt. Mm-hmm. So in their desperation to fill the gaps, they then they got in touch with Robert Holmes and said, can you come up with something at short notice?
Uh-huh.
And Holmes came up with Kroll, which was originally going to be the 4th episode, but Michael Hayes, who was slotted for the director, said, I'm not touching touching a giant octopus with a 10-foot barge pole. Allegedly, he expressed reservations about the practicality of doing Kroll.
Yeah.
Therefore, they swapped the 2 stories.
Uh-huh.
So Kroll was the replacement for slot number 4 and became slot number 5. And this is where it gets contradictory, because it appears that meanwhile they had commissioned David Fisher off the back of Stones of Blood to do, at least according to the subtitles, which is, I think, Richard Molesworth.
Yeah.
They commissioned him to basically write the Androids of Tara, the Prisoner of Zenda in space.
Right.
As a swashbuckling romance. But then the thing is, if the Ted Lewis story was on the slate at the same time, and especially if it was called The Doppelgangers, it feels like you've got 2 stories that are very much treading on each other's toes, potentially.
And also, so as you say, there's a link. There's a possibility that this inherited some of the ideas that had already been generated with the previous writer. But also, if I hadn't known that, I would have said that this was the sort of idea that you might expect a writer to come up with either at short notice or when he's already just written something else and his mind might be running dry of fresh ideas, to just say, well, let's do Prisoners in Space, a nice one-line pitch like that, which doesn't involve a lot of original thought, with the best will in the world. It's the sort of thing you might expect to result. Interesting.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and then so it goes into great detail about that in the subtitles to 1 episode, and then I think in episode 4 it briefly recaps the story, and basically there it says that Androids of Tara, it kind of says was a straight replacement for the Doppelgangers story. Yeah, I can't quite make hide nor hair of it.
Well, it's not unlike the 2 versions of creation you get in Genesis, one after the other.
Not unlike that.
Yes,
of equal theological importance throughout the millennia. Maybe there's a compromise version which makes both stories fit, because if they... I had it when you were saying it, and suddenly it made sense to me. Yeah. If you say to a writer, let's have another one, I haven't got any ideas, well, we were already thinking about doing something with doppelgangers. A writer whose head is full of childhood novels would think, Zenda?
Yeah.
So that's, it could all happen in a 5-minute discussion in the BBC bar.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know why I suggested it would be in the BBC bar. But
probably was. Let's face it.
It sounds all too plausible. Yeah. So I'm trying to get my head around Tara. Tara is the name of the planet, right? But it also seems to be the name of the place where the coronation happens. And
Tara, the capital city of Tara.
Yeah. Yes.
Well.
Yeah. But then what's the name of the country? Or is there only one country in Tara?
Tara, isn't it?
It's a bit like Iowa County, Iowa.
Yeah.
And I believe there is an Iowa City, but that's not in Iowa County, Iowa.
Right. Yeah, okay. And then there's the Taran Wood Beast, which, so far as I know, is not credited as the Taran Wood Beast either, in the script or indeed on, or in the credits or anything. But that seems to be what we call it.
Oh, who wonder which fan elder made that up?
It does.
Was it your mate Jeremy? Get him on the Jeremy hotline.
It does feel like it may have come from the pages of Doctor Who Monthly or Celestial Toy Room or something like that.
You got to love it.
It's a shame, isn't it? It's got nothing to do with the story, which is obviously why they didn't spend any money on it whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it's one of those. It's given people who don't like the story an excuse to write the whole thing off because it's got something visually appalling at the beginning. And they could have saved even more money, and they should have just got Agador out of the costume, painted him a different colour, painted him purple, and
yeah.
Well, my favourite theory, I can't claim credit. I'm not sure who came up with this. Might have been. Now, I'm not sure if it was a Tapwood idea, but my favourite fan theory is that the Taran Wood Beast is a local peasant that Grendel gets to dress up in this stupid costume, and go around terrorising any fair maidens that are wandering around the woods, so he can he can leap out and do some daring do.
Deeply plausible.
And he has that line about how he keeps some beasts on his land, doesn't he? So,
and is it a satire? I mean, it seems like the kind of lower classes are the ones who know what's going on and sort everything out, and the upper classes, whilst making a lot of noise and fury, don't actually have much to contribute. But I mean that it starts off quite strongly with that in episode 1, and then that seems to sort of fade away at some point in narrative.
I wouldn't complain about that. I think that's pretty standard, isn't it? That lots of the detail and the setting and the satire are early on while the writers enjoy themselves. The episode 1 tend to be full of that, and by episode 4, you've just left with them running around and tidying everything up, aren't you? So I think that's it. It is, isn't it? But Doctor Who in this era is full of that sort of thing. It just comes with the sort of writers they're choosing.
Yeah.
They seem to think that's part of the point of the programme, part of the fun you can have with it, that you don't just make up a ludicrous fantasy science fiction place. You don't just make up a planet with a silly name and have people wrapped in Baco foil. You say something, even if it's not play for day. They're not trying to change the world, but you just you don't write about nothing. They just can't help themselves but write about something. And I'm not saying it's better. As I say, I'm not saying that Doctor Who of other eras that don't have that are necessarily poorer for that reason, but I mean, I'm constantly drawn to compare Hinchcliffe and Williams eras because I like both of them, and I was told growing up that you had to pick one, and moreover that you had to pick Hinchcliffe, of course, because there was literally no way you could possibly prefer this. But whenever I watch these stories out of order, whenever I dart back and forward from Hinchcliffe to Williams, I am reminded, as much as you love the Hinchcliffe Holmes era for doing what it does, for sticking doggedly to trying to terrify anyone under the age of 12. And when you go back from this era, it seems to be lacking some colour. It's doing what it's doing very well, but it's suddenly there are fewer jokes, there are fewer women, there's less playfulness. It's all very single-mindedly about the horror, with odd exceptions, which tend to be the ones which people back in the day didn't like as much. They thought they were failures because they didn't. Android Invasion is a failure because it isn't Terror of the Zygons or whatever. I know, I'm talking about the wrong era.
No, I think that's a good point.
What other comparisons are there? There's the fact that in Hinchcliffe they're almost entirely pastiching Gothic literature and horror fiction, horror science fiction. They don't go very far outside that. Here we're taking influences from all over the place. And
I was thinking about, this is the only really, and I guess you could say City of Death does a Bulldog Drummond kind of thing, but that's really only ripping off one character. This is kind of the only one I can think of in at least the post Robert Holmes Williams era where we really get into doing a conscious homage. Do you not think?
What, to a specific work?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, you get myths and legends a bit, but you don't get necessary literature.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I guess you. Yes, I guess you get those. It's just interesting because I was thinking
until the new series.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
I think it's J&T that doesn't like it.
I was just thinking it's so. To my mind, it's so successful doing this, and it plays to the strengths of what the BBC could do at the time, especially at the time when they were famously suffering quite a heavy budget crunch. That I'm surprised they didn't revisit that and think, okay, what other kind of classic romance and adventure story literature can we?
It's true.
Can we give the Hinchcliffe treatment to, as it were?
There are lots of strengths. When people talk about the BBC's strengths, what they are talking about. It's not really the tone they're thinking of. It's the production standards that they can create. I mean, the Mask of Mandragora has the same sort of look, but it's very, very serious, isn't it? It's Shakespearean. But here we've abandoned any pretense that this is. I should stop obsessing over Hinchcliffe. You see, I'm still trying to work out. Part of my brain is still buzzing with trying to work out what on earth Robert Holmes was playing at, because when he writes it, he doesn't write it like that. But all the other stories that he's editing are much more serious and less playful. When he gets his hand on the wheel, and admittedly, as we just said about Talons of Weng Chiang, it's only really at the end that he starts involving lots of other literary pastiches. But he's taken for everywhere: detective fiction and pot boilers, thrillers, all that rummy stuff. So in a sense, Talons got more in common with this era. Some people say that what this is lacking is tension.
Yeah.
And I suppose you can see that. It's got some action, but what are its critics saying? That you don't ever really believe anyone's in danger, that it's too light and too playful?
Well, yeah, I mean, you could say that.
When you talk about the stakes, the low stakes, I don't think low stakes is a problem for drama. I don't think you need to have the universe exploding every week. And I think it makes a refreshing change to have the stakes be the survival of the right side in a minor political wrangle.
Yeah, well, just when you think that nothing bad's going to happen to anyone, they kill off Lamia. So, I mean, it isn't.
They do.
It's not that it's completely without stake. I mean, I think on the whole, I like the tone and I like the. I was quite swept up with it. I feel like I don't want Tom Baker to be serious, but I just think I want him to be slightly more disciplined in it. I'm happy with him, taking it lightly, but there are one or two occasions when it feels like. I mean, on the whole, I think with this one, he's got enough to do that he's quite enjoying it, and he's not doing anything too daft. But there's just the odd moment when it feels like he's lost interest a bit, and there's nobody around to say, "Look, Tom, can you do that properly this time, please?"
I know what you mean. Some of his shtick is getting a bit familiar, isn't it? And it's difficult to tell if it's in the script or if it's places where there wasn't a gag in the script and Tom has put one in to punch it up. But it's the same trick over and over again of reacting to something that another character says very earnestly and then undercutting it. Prince Reynard? Did you say Prince Reynard? Yes, never heard of him. That's what. But you get one or two of those every episode. That's very odd. Wouldn't you say that's odd? That's very odd. Handful of those.
Yeah.
The only one I know was a Tom invention was the bartering thing.
Well,
where he barters his way down.
Yeah.
As apparently spur of the moment.
Yes, that's the best joke in there. So that's
yeah.
As somebody who's written a script that I thought was, quite funny, had a few good gags in it, and then you hand it over, and the script that is recorded has a few scribbles on in Tom's handwriting, and the best joke in it is one of his, where he's seen the potential in what you wrote and turned it up to 11. I can well believe that. He's a very clever man.
There's one other literary allusion that I thought was in there, which is right at the end of episode 3. Grendel comes in with his flag of truce, which doesn't really convince anyone. But then he manages to both destroy the android king and steal off with Romana. And it seemed to me that to lose one might be regarded as a misfortune, but to lose both was possibly carelessness. I don't know. I think that was the one moment in it where I I couldn't quite believe that the Doctor would be as useless as that, really.
Yes, and that summer house sequence is probably the weakest, and it's a bit stilted, the whole thing with the android Romana, where Lamia is reduced to shoving her around and pointing her in different directions to try to shoot the Doctor. Yeah, it's a bit weak. Just the direction there falls down a bit.
While we're talking about androids, in case I forget to say it, can I just say that the performance of... Who's the chap who plays the Prince?
Oh, Lord. Neville something or other.
I think his android acting is extremely good.
Yeah.
It's very funny at times when it needs to be.
Yeah.
But also just very, very convincing. His stillness is eerie. His battery going flat acting is excellent. It's just brilliant all the way through, and it's you fully buy that the one on that side of the screen is a real person, and the other one is the one with the removable face that we saw earlier, which helps a lot.
Neville Jason.
And Mary Tam has a good stab at it as well.
Yes. Yes, and she also manages to get an even posher version of Romana, for Princess Estrella.
I don't think Romana's that posh.
I do like Mary Tam. I think she's great, and I think you don't get the. I think that I was watching the stuff where the Doctor wants to go fishing.
Yeah.
At the start, and it's really good screwball comedy, kind of the interplay between her and Tom in that scene, like a bit of eye rolling, bit of bit of back chat. It's
Yep.
I just thought, it's a bit like the whole Rose Tyler thing, to be honest. It's just like when you get to Romana 2 and Lalla and Tom, it all just gets a bit too smug. I think it's just that little bit too self-satisfied. Whereas I think they kind of bounce off each other. That the one-upmanship thing is fun.
Yeah.
The whole low-key opening to the story is interesting, isn't it? I think that's probably something you wouldn't have got if this was a fresh writer. I think it's only because he's just written one was all about the key to time. I think David Fisher's reacting against that and think, well, I'll get that out of the way.
Yeah.
Not in a way that I would think was a dereliction of duty. Not as one of those writers who can't be bothered to take the brief seriously, but just as in, let's do something different this time.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone feels shortchanged because it's not.
Yeah. Well, by story 4, I think it's fine, because you've
Absolutely.
already had 3 of those other ones.
Yeah, exactly. If you're going to do 6 in a row, you are going to be.
And of course, it's considering these pieces are randomly distributed and randomly disguised, why wouldn't you be able to get one nice and simply without encountering any peril on the way to the segment itself? It's just getting away with it turns out to be the issue. Peter Jeffrey's good, isn't he?
Yeah.
Oh, marvellous! Yeah, always watchable.
Anyone think of any other performances of his that might have suggested him for the role? I'm just wondering what Michael Hayes was thinking of. Did he do other fruity performances like this as a matter of course?
I'm trying to think what he does in the Avengers. I'm trying to remember which Avengers episodes he's in, because I know I've seen stuff like this where he's got quite the superciliousness, as it were. Whereas you wouldn't really think from Macroterra there was anything suggestive of it, would you?
No.
I've already forgotten Macroterra, and I only watched it about 18 months ago.
Oh, it's good. It's doing its own thing. It doesn't have a lot of room for larger-than-life characters. I wouldn't say he's wasted in the Macroterra, it's just that he's used expertly here. Michael Hayes is good as well, isn't he?
Yes.
Graham Williams' era gets a lot of criticism for its directors, just because they're not Douglas Camfield or David Maloney or whatever. But as we're not doing the sort of stories now that need Douglas Camfield and David Maloney, I don't think it's really a problem. And if you try and adjust your expectations and look what they're actually trying to do, the writers and the directors are doing a brilliant job and perfectly in tune. And you would like Michael Hayes.
Yeah.
He was kind of I feel like the fan world didn't know much about him until he's popped up on DVDs talking about just how involved he was in City of Death. But also here, having the strength to say, I'm not directing a giant squid. Give me something decent to do. You don't hear of many Doctor Who directors that try and pull that one.
No.
Something that's tickling the back of my mind about another director who... Oh no, I'm just thinking of Peter Moffat with State of Decay saying, "Oh, can you give me the original script back, please? This version's terrible."
I think the location work is pretty good, and there's one or two bits where he's sort of trying to film stuff through bits of vegetation to make it a little bit more interesting to look at and so on. It's all...
Yeah.
And fundamentally, he gets the whole thing done, doesn't he, for presumably the £2.50 that they had in the kitty, so you can't really complain about that, can you?
I think it's better than that. I think if you just look at the technical aspects, that sword fight in episode 4 is very well done.
Yes,
it's very well choreographed, and it used the set very well. And goodness me, we've seen that done a hell of a lot worse.
Definitely.
I'm not quite sure what the link is between these two stories today, whether it's fictional stories set in bucolic landscapes or if it's sword fights.
Very long sword fights at the end, yeah.
Yeah. How many other sword fights are there in Doctor Who? I've just been watching the Sea Devils in my private life. Don't judge me. And that's got quite a good sword fight. And so it's really the one to which they all have to compare is the one in the King's Demons, isn't it?
Yes.
I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah, I know.
Just pointlessly, gratuitously sarcastic. No, this is probably the best, I think.
Yes.
And it tells a story. It tells a story because you were moaning about the Fourth Doctor clowning too much, and he starts off clowning.
He does, yes.
In this fight, and then it is revealed, that he's just putting on his opponent to lull him into a false sense of security.
Yeah. And actually, Tom is of an age where you could believe that he... I mean, I know the Doctor's supposed to be a different age, but he sort of looks physically strong enough to be able to do all that kind of stuff. And let's face it, Peter Jeffrey's not in the first flush of youth either, so it does look like a reasonable match.
Do you think they're, or do you even know, is it mostly those two actors doing this sword fight? They're not doubled by stuntmen?
It says sort of organised by Terry Walsh. How much of it he does, I don't know.
Because when Peter Jeffrey put a mask, his helmet on, I was thinking, oh, hello, they're going to swap him out for Stuart Fell or whatever. But it is them, isn't it? And it looks remarkably good. And I was thinking, sometimes actors get to display hitherto unknown talents on screen. Where the production team find out that they can juggle or something, they write that in and you go, oh, look, they can juggle, that's good. But this isn't one of them, is it? Because actors would have just been trained in sword fighting.
Yeah.
Sword fighting, singing, dancing, they had to do it all in those days. They had to be all-round entertainers. Yes. So what Anthony Amy's excuse is, I don't know. Paul, will you just stick to the story in question and stop digressing?
Cyril Shaps. I mean, it's not...
Cyril Shaps there.
I didn't recognise him. That's bad of me, isn't it? Must be the beard.
Yes. I mean, it's not much of a role for him, but it's quite nice to see him back again.
It's quite fun. I quite like his slight incredulity of... He seems to be the world's most gullible Archimandrite, and I mean that's part of the fun of it on a meta level. The fact that Count Grendel is this dastardly villain, but he is nevertheless absolutely pernickety about the fact that he is going to get the throne of Tara by engineering a succession scenario in which he is legitimately on the throne.
Yes.
No matter how many people he has to kill along the way, the one thing he won't do is actually interfere with the line of succession. It's quite amusing the preposterous links to which he'll by the time he's telling the Archimandrite, oh well, yeah, I don't think Prince Reinhardt's long for this world, so yeah, then you can marry him off to his then you can marry me off to his widow shortly afterwards. And Declan Mulholland, of course.
I thought I was going to be the only person to mention him.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Can I be the one?
Funny enough, is in the Sea Devils as well.
He is. Yes, it's been quite a week for me and Declan Mulholland. I only really know him from the Sea Devils and this, and being the original Jabba the Hutt. Which we all know, don't we?
Oh yes.
He does keep his accent and everything, doesn't he? He's got the same accent in Sea Devils. And I think he has. I haven't gone back and checked when he's being Jabba the Hutt talking to, wandering around the Millennium Falcon with Harrison Ford in a big fur coat. Have you seen that, Richard? You're looking very blank.
No. And I mean, I do know that Jabba wasn't originally a huge, great monster. I was just thinking that about the accent thing. If it was good enough for Sean Connery, then it's. I don't see why anyone else shouldn't have a crack at it.
Now he's funny, and there's and again it's a small part, but he gets one scene where he gets to do a bit of business with Tom. It's when he's coming in, giving him the secret information, and he keeps punctuating every sentence. He looks off to his side as if there's somebody listening, which is funny. And I could just imagine those two working that up together in the rehearsal
Yeah.
rooms before a liquid lunch, or possibly afterwards.
The whole thing when he's welcoming Count Grendel back to the castle, the whole tugging the forelock and dancing, dancing his way in. Come over here, sir. Come over here.
I know we're on the cast now, but I was going to talk about Lamia as a character.
Yeah, go on.
Yes, interesting character. I know I keep banging my drum about how one of the lesser noticed things about this era is that there are better parts for women.
Yeah.
But it's true, there are. And this is not... Interesting talking point, potentially. This is the sort of part that would probably have been male in most of these stories. The android technician obviously would have been male. It's not just been swapped to be female just this... Well, who knows? I don't think it's been swapped to be female just for the sake of it, because, of course, she has the interesting relationship with Grendel.
Yeah.
Which also crosses a class divide. So it's an interesting dynamic there.
Yes.
And she, again, although she gets one good scene when she's talking to Romana, and there's some reasonably subtle understated writing about that she knows. She's not under any illusions
Yes, that's right.
about her future, but she just can't help it, which is nice. It doesn't. I mean, it's a nice scene between two women. It doesn't pass the Bechdel test because they're talking about a man. But, this is 1978. You can't have everything.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite a restrained performance as well. She's very calm throughout it. What am I trying to say? I mean, she's not playing it in the sort of cliched female way for the 1970s.
No, just to pick the thing I watched most recently, The Sea Devils. Captain Hart, the naval chief's assistant, is a lady officer, but she's very attractive and got an enormous amount of makeup on, and is mostly just saying yes sir, no sir, and offering people plates of sandwiches. So
yeah,
it's not always about what the actress is capable of, but what on earth they're given, what opportunities they have.
Yeah.
And I think this is just well written to start with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, but she's nobody else is playing up the villainy. Most of them are giving large and life performances, but nobody else is trying to outdo Peter Jeffrey as the villain, because he is there to twirl his moustache, is he not?
Yes. I've realised the thing that, talking of Peter Jeffrey, going back to that, it's not really the same sort of thing, but of course he's the villain in The Joker, the episode of The Avengers, which is the famously where it stops being Mrs. Peel we're needed every week and being all quirky, and is the Emma Peel stuck in the house of traps and possibly haunted house.
Is he in that one?
For the
the house that Jack built.
Oh, hang on, are we mixing it up?
I don't know.
I'm mixing it up. I have a feeling this is the one that they made about two or three times over. I thought it was called The Joker, or is that the?
I'm sure you
did
know
they
your
remake
Avengers
it?
better than I do. I'll pause the recording while we check this. Can you play some light music? Get your kazoo or your ukulele out.
Here we go.
I'm afraid we can't return any of your pictures, but we do. We did give a prize for those.
Yeah,
that
we
share.
can't read any of your tweets or give us stuff about any of your comments.
The house Jack built is the black and white version, and I think that
Emma Peel's in. Is she in that, or am I getting confused?
yes, yeah.
You can enjoy editing this bit, Richard.
Okay, well they are, but yes, basically the Joker is the colour remake of.
Okay.
The Joker is
Brilliant.
the colour remake of the house that Jack built.
So what else is there to say, Richard?
Well, the only thing that I have to say that I was desperate to say was that is Castle Gracht the primary wedding location on Tara, the
I was wondering
planet, or in the country? Because it seems unlikely, I'd have thought, if you were the Archimandrite, that all these people would have chosen to get married in that particular location. But,
Shall I give you some local expert knowledge on Leeds Castle?
Oh
Well,
yes.
Because, of
please
course,
do.
listeners out there might be thinking that Richard would be better placed to talk about Leeds Castle, but no, it's not that Leeds, is it, Richard?
We don't have a castle in Leeds.
No, it's in Kent, where all the best castles are. I'm not sure they show it off quite enough. It's you get that one nice long shot, don't you? They show once or twice, but
With the
the rest
glass,
of it's quite.
with the matte painting for the glass painting for the turrets.
Yeah, that's good. You can now hire a Segway and drive around the grounds and revisit all of the filming locations very quickly.
Okay.
And be chased by geese. I hardly recommend it.
But no Taran Wood Beast.
Well, it's a large. The grounds are large, and I can't swear I've covered every inch of them, so it might still be there.
So I was just going to say that, and possibly as a link, possibly not, that it looks rather more impressive than the castle they've chosen to use for Robot of Sherwood, which looks too obviously ruined as far as I can see.
Now, I didn't bother looking at where that is.
Is it Caerphilly or is that somewhere else?
Of course it would have to be, wouldn't it?
There's a couple of castles I think that they use for it.
Right. Yeah.
Can I just say the other thing about this that I think it's not an original observation, but that this is actually, despite the historical romance dressings, this is possibly as close as Doctor Who comes to doing Star Wars. Yeah. Really. In that you've got, bowcasters and laser swords and swashbuckling. It's actually quite a lot closer to Star Wars than as we understood it in 1977, 78.
Yeah.
Than a lot of the actual sci-fi.
The Invisible Enemy.
Doctor Who. Yes. Yeah. And in spirit.
Well, thankfully they never. I don't think they ever really try. Big Finish tried once, and I didn't think it really came off, despite all the talent involved. It's a difficult thing to, despite the fact that it's so heavily predicated on other fictional eras. It's a very unique feel, Star Wars, and I don't think you can translate it very easily. Yeah. Richard, you talked at the beginning about satire. Is this a satire, you said? And I persuaded you that was just one of many, many layers. But I do find it the whole idea of the peasants being the ones who are skilled in android construction, I think, is one of the nicest elements of this. Nobody really goes into it in detail. It's just it's just something we're asked to believe. But it is. Would you like to discuss it as a socio-political satire? Or would you like to move swiftly on? Because that could fit in your Marxist analysis, which I think you were heading towards at the beginning. The fact that the productive labour is done by these peasants enthralled in their serfdom, and the useless aristocrats have no discernible skills of their own whatsoever. But it's amplified, isn't it? It's heightened. They're not just in a traditional Marxist analysis. The productive labour is sowing, is sheafing the corn and keeping the aristocrats fed. Here, they literally have skills that are way beyond anybody on our planet, but they're still peasants, which I think says something about the arbitrary nature of these sorts of class divides. It tells us something about why it was fashionable. It reminds you of the fact it was fashionable to have very pale skin in certain eras in Europe, because if you had a healthy complexion, that meant you spent all the time outdoors, which means you're a labourer. So the more the more useless you were. This seems to be the unspoken suggestion. The more it could be proved that you did nothing of any worth, or any practical value in society, the more important you were. And this is, in its own way, tapping into that, but not making a big song and dance about it.
Yeah,
it's not being written as the Play for Today version. It's. I'm sorry, I've just been watching the Play for Today documentary. We should all watch that.
It would be interesting to have some more background on the society, or whether or not this is. I mean, putting the science fiction trappings on this. Is this a degraded Earth colony that has gone down this route, or what? What's the actual origin of the society? Because you could imagine it being. You can kind of imagine it being another State of Decay kind of scenario, almost. I was
thinking that. I was thinking that at the beginning.
Whether people are preserving, some people have preserved the technology, and the officer class have become the nobility and cultivated the finer things at the expense of being able to do anything useful.
Yeah, it's either more interesting than that, or, depending on a point of view, less plausible than the traditional science fiction look. Because, as you say, it's normally some of the peasants have kept the technology but don't understand it. They worship it. This sort of science fiction is never normally on the side of the ordinary people. They're not peasants, they're normally savages. In these sorts of tales. And of course he does have his cake and eat it, because this almost entirely concerns the aristocrats. We don't see... We're told Lamia is a peasant. She sounds quite posh to us is. They don't actually try to follow through on all the promise.
Yes, we don't see Declan Mulholland.
It might have been faintly ludicrous if she was doing one of a typical BBC peasant sort of.
Well, she's maybe from Rada, the twin planet of Tara. I don't know.
But anyway, there you go. That's what I think. I think it's a very pleasant story.
Yeah.
And it might have been improved with the suits on more drama. But other than that, I think it achieves what it sets out to do extremely well. And I'm so glad we have stories like this occasionally rather than bad original science fiction.
I think I should leave it less than another 42 years before I watch it for a third time.
Yes, I mean, in general, I would agree, and in noting your particular situation, I wouldn't leave anything another 42 years.
Are you telling me I'm not going to make 94?
I've just had a birthday since we last recorded. I'm catching up with you.
Yes, of course.
In lockstep.
I suppose a couple of nice curveballs into the mix in terms of the cliffhangers and so on. I mean, I find the Doctor clubbing down Romana at the end of that's episode 2, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's quite effective because I don't think we have had I confess I might have wandered away from the TV for a moment, but I don't think we actually we're not given a clue beforehand that's about that particular scheme of Grendel's, although he outlines most other things.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know what's coming, we know what the plan is, but in that case it's quite a nice surprise moment.
It is, yeah.
You think, she turns up and you think, what the hell's going on? Obviously, we were talking about with regards to the comparisons with the book, with the Prisoner of Zenda, and in this case, obviously, that's hinged on the idea that the hero Rudolf Rassendil is the double, and so he has to kind of carry the roles of the Doctor and the android duplicates are one and the same, and so we don't have all the other mucking around with doubles, and we don't have the idea of Romana and of having another set of duplicates going on around there. But otherwise, it's pretty faithful to the book. Oh, and then on the other hand, it's funny they split one protagonist and united the two antagonists on the other side, because you have Black Michael and Rupert of Hentzau, who are merged together to make Grendel of Gracht, because Hentzau is the kind of henchman to Black Michael, who's the one who wants to actually get onto the throne. But one thing they have done, they fix a plot hole in the original, which is that when they have the drugging scene at the hunting lodge in the actual book, Black Michael comes in and takes away Prince Rudolph, but apparently leaves the twin, despite presumably there being an opportunity for him to observe the twin, the doppelganger, he just leaves him lying around for mischief to be made. Whereas in this, obviously, the android has been happily packed off, so it makes more sense that Grendel is somewhat taken aback when they open the doors on the coronation chamber and the prince is apparently on the throne.
Good point.
Just a little nicety.
Here's to David Fisher.
Yep.
Okay, are we ready to look at the second one?
Yes. Let's move on to a different castle.
So, our second story, Robot of Sherwood, written by Mark Gatiss, from the early part of Series 8. I mean, we already looked at Deep Breath. Well, it doesn't feel like that long ago. I suppose it was probably 6 months ago. Interestingly, for this era, there's no credit for Stephen Moffat in it, so it seems like Mark Gatiss is the one that he allows to go away and write stuff, trusts him, and doesn't sort of spend a huge amount of time fiddling with it. And directed by Paul Murphy, who also directed The Caretaker.
Oh, right. Are they his only 2 stories?
So far as I could tell.
I thought it was very nicely done. Because I'm getting very old, I no longer remember I haven't got room in my head for the names of all the directors like I do for the classic series, so they come and go, and I don't know where they came from by and large, but it just seemed effortlessly to be making the best of the material, both the actors and visually.
I think there's more of them. There's more of the directors in the new series. You don't get these kind of same names turning up again and again.
No. No. Wonder why. Do they not want to hang around? Are they using it as a stepping stone?
Yeah, possibly. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they're able to pick him up sort of cheap while they're sort of early in their careers, and then they move on to bed.
Well, it does seem as though they're the sort of people they're choosing, doesn't it? And it has mixed results. But again, as I'm saying far too often, I thought it was much more striking visually than a lot of the stuff we've had in the last couple of seasons. I'm not quite sure why.
So I mean, my quick take on it before we go into detail was that I remember hating it when it was originally shown, and I quite enjoyed it this time. I'm struggling to remember why I hated it so much, and I think it might come down a little bit towards the character of the 12th Doctor. No doubt we'll get into that, but
I think I might largely agree with you there. I don't remember hating it, but I also almost I remember being quite annoyed by it and just writing it off as another one of those occasions when I won't get those 47 minutes of my life back. And again, this time I thought it was terrific. So how? And I've been trying to work out why.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's the same thing I keep saying over and over again, that I took for granted the quality of the show back then, that they could churn this stuff out week after week, even what the filler episodes. And listeners, in case you don't remember, when I say that, I don't think that. I just mean the ones that tend to get ignored or overlooked or written off because they're not part of a big arc. They're often some of my favourites, but they can also tend to be ones in the 50-minute format that don't work as well for me because it's a tricky thing to pace correctly. But this one is done very nicely, and for once it has just the right number of twists and turns. When I say it has just the right number, we'll probably get onto this later, it almost has one too many, but some unexpected editing pruned that and ended up with just the right amount of plot development. It could actually have tipped over into one of those stories where my eyes start rolling in the last 5 minutes, which happens quite a lot when writers panic and think they just need one more twist. But we'll come on to that.
Giles, do you have a sort of quick thought about the episode?
Yeah, I felt fairly similar to you two, that I remember not really enjoying this at the time. For me, I have a feeling the Robin Hood performance wound me up. I think for some reason, again, I can't quite work it out now why it's irritated me at the time, and I haven't watched it again since, as tends to be the story of our life on this show.
Yeah. And
again, I came back to it and I found, I wouldn't say I was absolutely blown away by it, but I found it perfectly pleasant viewing for a rewatch and quite diverting in its way.
Okay.
Good news. I don't feel like that's the first time we've expressed these sorts of sentiments about a new Who episode, and possibly not the first time that it's been a Mark Gatiss New Who episode. So I don't know if there's anything in this, but we keep seeming to say that he writes episodes that we don't fully appreciate on first. For one reason or another, on first viewing, and that take time to mature. All apart from Victory of the Daleks, which we still didn't like, but all the others, I think we've
tended to find
we've more than made our peace with.
Yeah, and I guess the nature of his experience as a comic writer comes to the fore here as well. I mean, you could maybe say on occasion it's a little bit smug, but on the whole, it's nicely done. There's some nice comic touches in it.
He generally balances. I mean, it's more consistently comic than most of his episodes, isn't it?
Yeah.
He normally balances the comedy and pathos and commentary in equal measures. So I don't know if he was being encouraged to write something a bit lighter here, because of course it's an important early episode for a new Doctor, so it would have been considered to have a particular job to do. But it plays very much to one of his obvious strengths, which he must think of as a strength himself, because he does like chewy pseudo-historical dialogue, which he can fill with half-remembered classical references, and indeed references to anything that pops into his head at any moment.
Yeah.
Which makes it very entertaining to watch. What I like about it is it's based upon a conceit which is played for laughs throughout most of the story, and then turns out to be tangentially related to the actual plot, and then has some sort of semi-meaningful payoff at the end. But the idea that the Doctor assumes that Robin Hood can't be real before they even get there, and then everything that happens when he meets him seems to bear out his prejudice.
Yeah.
Is the main point of this, isn't it? That seems to be the starting point, and it's carried on possibly a little too consistently throughout. And it works very nicely for me, but the bit that didn't work as well, and on first viewing I think it's the thing that put me off, is the antagonism between Robin Hood and the Doctor just makes the Doctor look lesser. It makes him look... I'm used to going... when you watch these early 12th Doctor stories out of context, it is slightly startling just how much of an arsehole he is. Which I think is the thing that unfortunately encumbers a lot of these Season 8 stories. He's just overwritten. We just discussed this under Deep Breath, didn't we?
Yeah.
We discussed the fact that it's not really prevalent in Deep Breath and then suddenly appears in the next episode. And he's just being unnecessarily snarky. At some point they decide that's the way to go with him. I suppose it's leavened a bit here because it's played for laughs. And he's not just being nasty to ordinary people, to underlings who just don't deserve it and can't cope with it, as he is in some of the other stories. He's just running around barking insults at people. Here, it's a lot more palatable because we can see why he would be annoyed with Robin Hood. He's annoyed on two fronts, isn't he? He's annoyed because, on a character level, because Robin Hood is a merry man, constantly laughing for no reason, and this Doctor does not like people who laugh, which is quite nice. We can understand that he might not like people who are ostentatiously happy because of his Scottish disposition. We can understand that a bit better than when he says, is coming up with lines like, "She cares, so I don't have to," which still haunts me to this day, and I will never forgive. So it's partly on that level, and also the fact that it offends his sensibilities that Robin Hood might be real, which, when he's played his hand, that he was fictional before they got there. But where it starts to fall down, I think, I was really enjoying the first 16, 17 minutes. And there's a hell of a lot that goes on in that it's nicely paced. There's a lot that goes on in that first quarter. But then when they're all locked up together, Robin Hood, Doctor Who, and Clara, I don't really like that midsection so much, because it falls into, even though this is written by Mark Gatiss, it falls into one of those Stephen Moffat tropes. The two men arguing, having a sort of metaphorical dick measuring competition, trying to impress the woman. And that ruins the whole of that midsection for me. And it also makes the Doctor look like a tit. He looks petty, and it's just too much.
It's a retread of Day of the Doctor, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah.
Where they have exactly the same scenario, except there's three of them then. Although, I suppose, the sort of smart one is shared by John Hurt and Clara in that particular one. But nonetheless, it's kind of the same thing, I agree.
I like the gag that it ends with the minion being sent to... he's been observing them to find out which one's the ringleader, and you see it's Clara. That's a funny gag in itself, but it's over. The way we get there is overwritten, and I don't think we needed the Doctor to look... I can imagine that same scene with Matt Smith, and you could have the villains would not assume that the Doctor was in charge, because generally the Doctor never looks like he's the one in charge, does he?
No.
He does appear incompetent and ineffectual, but not. But you can do that in other ways than because he's whatever the 12th Doctor is.
But I guess the problem with this one is that not only does he appear incompetent and ineffectual, he's actually incompetent and ineffectual, because he loses the key at some point.
Yeah, it's just too much, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And equally for me, Clara is set up to be the best, but she doesn't seem to be. It doesn't feel quite earned. She doesn't feel to me that she's quite smart enough to be able to carry that off.
But that's what I don't dislike Clara the way some people do, but I can understand why they do, and it's because she's written to be an uber proficient companion right from the beginning, isn't it? And sometimes in the writing that comes across as something that the writers are assuming is inherent to the character without any need to demonstrate it. Other times, it's funny you mentioned 10th Doctor and Rose earlier. I think you said the 10th Doctor and Rose, but the smugness. I think this is the first time we really returned to that season 2 feel, where so again a lot of the middle section was spoilt for me, and going into what would be part 3, the third act, because both the Doctor and Clara are just being very, very smug. And for all that you might, a viewer of the Androids of Tara might think, well, Tom Baker's not taking it seriously, there's no threat, I don't ever believe the Doctor's in any harm. I still don't think that's nothing compared to what we have here, where neither the Doctor in his own way or Clara seem to break a sweat in getting out of these situations. We know she's very competent and very, very clever. And, of course, they later turn that into a character trait first, that she's actually trying to be the Doctor rather than the assistant. They make that explicit, don't they, in her last series. And that becomes her downfall. But it is... Maybe the problem starts here, when the Doctor stops acting like the Doctor and sort of forces her to...
Yes, yeah, you're right.
To take up the slack. But then you've got them both doing it. And that, in its own way, can act as a barrier, stopping us getting too engaged with the drama, because we don't really believe. What's the point in sticking around to watch? It all becomes about how they're going to get out of this, rather than whether they will.
I guess the reason why I don't believe Clara's competence is that she's so trusting over Robin and the Merry Men. Now, I mean, as it turns out, the trust is well placed, but she doesn't know enough going into it to be sure of that.
Again, it's reminiscent of Rose, isn't it? She was always very excited about meeting historical figures, bouncing up and down. But it's not as bad as that.
Yes, there's the look on her face when they do the slide down the ripping curtain thing at the end, when her and Robin. It's a little too it's a bit too self-satisfied about. There's no look of terror or excitement or anything like that on her face when they're doing it. Yeah, it's a bit too cocky. And considering this is the series before we were meant to go down the Clara's getting too cocky for her own good avenue. So,
But that running plot about the Doctor not believing is played for almost the entire length. He doesn't believe. He doesn't believe that Robin Hood can be true, can be real. He meets him. They're so over the top with their Merry Men antics. He assumes that there's something funny going on. Lists a lot of science fiction tropes that would explain it. That's quite nicely done, because we're all, it's trusting your audience to go with you on that. And then when it pays off at the end, I actually found it quite moving this time, oddly enough. And I wasn't expecting to. When Robin turns the tables on the Doctor, because off-screen, Clara's filled him in on who the Doctor is.
Oh, yes.
And he describes himself, and it applies to the Doctor as well, if you squint a bit. I mean, I wasn't really expecting that to work as well as it did. And because of that, though I didn't really entirely buy the reasons why Robin Hood seemed so fake early on, I went with it because... And they tried to do several different tricks there. They tried to have that whole what will I be remembered as thing that we first saw it with Dickens, don't they? There's quite a cursory run at that. Well, are you telling me I'll be remembered as a fictional character, not as a real man? But because that doesn't really have that much weight behind it, they gloss over it. Robin says, fair enough.
So what about the sheriff then? So I think that I gathered from the plot he's supposed to have been enhanced in some way. He's not an actual android, but he's got some aspects of.
Are there any clues to that on screen whatsoever?
No.
There's half of a line about.
Apart from the line, yeah.
Yes, it's a bit like McGann. He's half human, but yeah, that's the only thing that's said.
Just doing that final sword fight on the top, but then again earlier on he punches one of the robot knights, and apparently bruises his hand and is damaged, and so you assume he's human. Yeah. And Paul, you might want to talk us through what's missing for those who are unaware, since you hinted at it earlier.
I'm not 100% sure. I wasn't going to go into details, but maybe I'll have to. The one scene that we know for a fact was cut is a scene where the sheriff would have been beheaded.
Yeah.
And that presumably would have been the reveal that he was an android as well. And that had to be cut out due to some unfortunate real-life events just in the week before it was due to be shown. funny, interesting that they never seem to have considered putting them back in for repeats or for DVD
Yeah.
release. We're stuck with this version. Now, I must have missed that if there is a line suggesting before that point that he's partly robot. I missed it, and so I was...
It's not entirely clear whether that would have been after the decapitation or before it.
I was watching it this time trying to work out... In fact, I think I was the first time, because unfortunately it got revealed... Maybe it was on the forums rather than any more widely, but I think it got revealed before it was originally shown, wasn't it, that it had to be re-edited? Or maybe it was in the papers as well.
I think the script edited, this was a series where they had the script leaked out of some BBC office in Miami or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
However it happened that the scripts of the first 5 leaked onto the internet. My understanding of it was that must have happened, and then the sheriff picked up his head and put it back on.
Yeah.
And continued the fight.
I hadn't thought of that. So just a moment like that, right? I was thinking, right, okay. I was assuming it would have come at the end, and there's a whole sequence where he climbs back out of the pit of molten gold, like the Terminator.
Terminator style, yeah.
And then you would know for the first time he's an android, and presumably then you could cut his head off with impunity. Interesting. So if what you said is true, then that would have been quite a quick moment. That might only have taken a minute at most. Because I noticed that the running time isn't ridiculously short. It doesn't look like they've cut anything major out.
But wouldn't it have been quite gruesome though for Robin Hood to have swiped off the head? I mean,
which version? Giles's version or mine?
Giles's version, which I believe is the real version. So I don't. Yeah, I mean, I'm quite glad that they've chosen to edit it this way, because I don't think I want the original.
No.
Well, I suppose, given how they cut it or whatever, you've only got to have him. I guess you'd have the head knocked off and the body staggering around and going over and picking up the head in a bit of a Mickey the Auton style.
Yeah. But that's the point.
Comedy.
It wouldn't look gruesome because he is a robot, but Robin Hood didn't know that.
No.
So it's gruesome in a character point of view. That Robin Hood is going into
he's a
beheaded, not thinking he's a man.
That's true, and I think especially given real world events.
So that makes it contrived in the wrong sort of way. That he only performs that specific violent action on this character because the writer knows that it's not going to be gruesome because he's a robot, and that's the wrong reason to do that stuff, something like that. So I think that doesn't work dramatically for me. So on that basis, I'm glad it's gone.
Yeah.
But then, because I missed any hints that he is part android, that's what I was referring to earlier. The suggestion that would have been one twist too many.
Yeah.
I feel like it is a big detail to change if I'm not alone in thinking that you can watch this without picking up on the idea that the sheriff is supposed to be either a robot or enhanced. It's a massive change to the character, and cutting out what I thought was all the evidence for that.
Well, I mean, but there's more than that for me. So I mean, the issue I've got is that what's the motivation of the sheriff if he isn't a human? Why is all this going on? I mean, what's the point of a half android or full android?
I presume that the whole thing with because it really doesn't, it's not elucidated, but I presume the whole thing with the scene with Clara, where the sort of pseudo seduction scene where he gets the story out of him, has presumably got to have that's got to be his memory of what happened. And then he has been enhanced. They've chosen him, and he has been enhanced by them. Although we don't, that's the only way it can make much sense. Because otherwise, he's clearly not just the android leader that's come to Earth with them.
I don't see what it adds to the story. It's just
neither do I.
It doesn't change. It doesn't explain his motivation or change the way we look at him. Really, does it? In fact, for me. That's why I thought it would have felt like a gratuitous extra twist, one twist too many, because he acts like a human.
Yeah.
And it would actually overcomplicate things and make it less comprehensible if in some way he wasn't. There would be a missing chunk of the story. The story would then have to be about why somebody who was partly inhuman would not know that. Or because he doesn't seem to know it, does he? Does he? I mean, I don't know. And it would leave too many questions hanging.
Well, he seems to think
So
that
much-
he's going to be king or something, doesn't he? Which, I mean, why would an android want to be king? I mean, it doesn't make much sense to me.
Why would that bloke with the skin problem in Ghostlight? Sorry, that's not a genuine question. It's a rhetorical question.
Well, yeah, but I guess because people like Count Grendel and like this sheriff kind of want power, but why does an android want it? And
Yeah.
Well, he's definitely meant to be a hybrid of some.
yes,
Again, bringing.
I mean, you could have explained it away very easily because we've got a spaceship that's full, inexplicably, of all the myths and legends of Earth's history.
yeah.
Has it arrived from the future, by the way? Is that explained?
No, the Doctor waves around the fact it's 29th century technology.
Oh, does he?
At one point.
Does that supposed to be dating to the girl in the fireplace and Deep
No,
Breath,
that's
the Clockwork
50,
people?
That's 52nd. That
Oh,
all
God.
comes from the Wing Shang era.
Right.
As it were.
Okay.
All of that stuff ties back. I believe
30 something is Ark in Space era, isn't it?
Yeah, but when he throws out this idea, it's 29th century, but then doesn't.
Oh, just before, right?
And then it's on its way. Somehow it's on its way to this promised land, which is.
I'd completely forgotten all that. That baffled me watching it out of context. Yeah. That's heading towards Missy's computer.
Which supposedly
cyberspace with all the souls in it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is an idea that I now can't remember how that tied in with the Return of the Cybermen, if indeed it did. But we're not talking about that, are we? Does that feel to you like something that was crowbarred in once the showrunner decided on the overarching plot for the season?
Yeah,
I think so. I don't think it has to be there for any. I don't think there's no real sign that it's integral to the structure of this plot.
No.
All you need is a crashed spaceship.
Yeah. Any of those moments where the Doctor effectively turns the camera and says, "This is just like that thing that happened last week. Remember?"
Yes.
And winks at the audience. They're the moments that I am suspicious of.
I'm trying to remember where the whole lift-off of the faulty engines is. It the Warrior's Gate one? Is that what I'm thinking of? Is there something else? Is there another story?
Bounce back will blast back and destroy us all.
No, is there something else that involves some taking off with a faulty engine? I suppose there's numerous things along that line. Planet of Evil and things like that have got. I'm just thinking about where Gators is likely to be plundering.
I've got a vague memory of
ideas
slightly different, isn't it?
I've got a vague memory of being unsatisfied with that ending the first time round, and this time round it seemed to make perfect sense to me that it hasn't got enough gold to be fully stable, so it's going to explode anyway. But it also hasn't got enough to get out of the atmosphere, so it's going to destroy Earth. So the arrow is just enough to give it enough extra oomph to get out of the atmosphere, so it can explode harmlessly. That seems logically quite tight. So that's
yes. I mean, the
perfectly happy
physics
with that.
is potentially a little bit lacking, but
I'm not talking about real physics. I'm just the internal logic of the story, as in some gold, enough gold, too much gold. And
in Silver Nemesis terms, it's perfect. Yeah.
There was it did remind me of that a little bit. Another bit that I thought was slightly clumsy, and I don't know whether this is just me being picky, but it might just be a factor of the short episode lengths. But the Merry Men raise the question of the significance of the gold in a cutaway scene with none of our heroes present, just apparently to give them something to do. And then later on, the Doctor thinks of the same thing himself, and then comes up with the answer. So I'm not a big fan of that kind of writing, but I know what it's done. It's done so that it doesn't come out of nowhere. The Doctor doesn't just pull it completely out of a hat at the end, which I think I would have liked even less. So it's there to give the audience a chance to think about it, start ruminating what the point of the gold is, ready for the Doctor to tell them. But it's not ideal that dramatically there's no link between them discovering it and Doctor Who a bit later on. So 1 point on, 1 point off for that. Did we notice David Benson playing the chap who officiates at the arrow shooting competition?
No.
Oh, that's who it is. Right.
My good friend David Benson.
Yes, I knew I recognised him from somewhere. Yeah.
vaguely remember him saying that it was cut down quite a lot. Whether or not there was lots more scripted for his character, if he was just ad-libbing, I don't know. I should have asked him prior to this, but I didn't. That was funny. I like that. That's the sort of thing that when these sorts of stories should be doing, if they genuinely want to be funny, then you can riff on the tropes of the genre and take the piss out of the splitting arrow in half trope by having a third and a fourth and a fifth arrow splitting each other in half sequentially. Feels like a new gag to me. I don't think I've seen that done before.
That's nice. So the Doctor's arrow is a homing device.
So he tells us later on.
Yes. Are we supposed to think that Robin Hood's just that good?
Yes, because this is... Well, that's the level this story's on, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was going to talk about that, really. Tonally, Android Zatara is what we Doctor Who fans call a romp. And I suppose this is a romp in the modern-day version of a romp.
Yeah.
But they're not tonally identical, are they? So what's the difference? Is this one trying to work on more than one level at a time? Is Android Zatara consistently working on the same level of rompiness, and Robot of Sherwood trying to be a romp and then pull the rug out? Well, not so much pull the rug out in front of you, but explain why it's rompy at the end. It doesn't feel like it can just present us with something this silly without taking a step back at the end and saying, actually, the characters who seemed silly were doing that for a reason, and all the things that seemed unbelievable have an explanation.
Yeah. I mean, when Robot of Sherwood breaks the fourth wall, only to discover that the fourth wall is still there after all, whereas Tara just sort of is quite happy with the fact that it's slightly preposterous, but but internally consistent, I guess.
Yes.
Yes, the only nod in Tara is I think the
Oh yes.
I think the Doctor has a why not? It's been done before.
Indeed, yes.
Moments at one point, but
and who knows whether that's not an ad lib then, Richard? If you say that there was only one ad lib and it wasn't that same gag is possible. I wonder if that gag wasn't David Fisher's. Maybe it was Anthony Reid, the script editor, because they do the same gag in Horns and Nymon. They wink at the members of the audience who know that this is based on the Greek myths.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's the only. I'm not saying the bartering thing is the haggling thing is the only ad lib gag. It's just the only one that I'm aware of.
Oh, you said that. Sorry.
Yeah.
I apologise for giving Richard the credit for your amazing observation.
It's not that great. You need to give Richard Molesworth the credit, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, in this one, yes, it's much more self-consciously, and yeah, as you say, Andrew Zatara kind of just gets on with it, and if it's there's an opportunity for characters to be witty along the way, and Tom to be slightly zany in his way. But this one is much more kind of, and Robin Hood's basically Lord Flashheart, isn't he?
Yes.
I guess that's the point. But the problem is
I think this is what jarred with me the first time, and then this time I quite enjoyed it.
The problem is turning the Doctor into Blackadder. That's the problem.
Yes.
And of course, not everybody was a fan. Not all Blackadder fans were fans of the Flashheart episodes. Particularly, I think each time he appeared, and come Blackadder goes forth, he's Vertigo stealing the episode from Rowan Atkinson, but he's also giving Blackadder, the title character, less to do.
Yeah.
It's a tricky thing to pull off when you have a scene-stealing character, isn't it? But anyway, I don't have a preference for romps that are happy just to work on their own level, and as you say, the self-conscious modern version, which is what we get nowadays. If you're going to push the boundaries of realism, you have to explain why you're doing it nowadays. And I don't mind either, as long as you pick one, do it well, and stick to it. And here, I think it works because it's not like the myth makers, for example, presenting us with the Greek myths and winking at the audience about how this is going to play out because we all know our history, and pretending we're going to get the comedy version of it and then pulling the rug from under our feet at the end. It's not doing that.
Well, no. Now I'm imagining an episode, a version of this story where the final scene plays out like Blake.
Yeah.
They're all brutally shot down by the androids.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's quite nice in a way that Gatiss thinks to himself, well, one of the times when we had this kind of scenario, of people being stereotypes was Carnival of Monsters, and that turned out to be, actually a show in a box. So let's make an explicit reference to that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's it. Part of the self-consciousness is because writers nowadays are also tend to be fans, so it's difficult to write a Doctor Who story without the weight of all the thousands of previous episodes buffeting your brain while you're trying to think of something original. And also, he's extremely intelligent and well-read, so when you put all that together, of course he's going to be trying to do every version of this story at once. I think what I was going to say was that in New Who, in the old days, there are lots of different types of historicals. You could have them told straight, like they could be didactic, educational. They could be farcical, satirical. Now there's only one type. They are the romps. Tends to be when you get a romp in New Who is because it's a historical, and you have to jazz it up a bit. You can't be any of those things. We're not here to inform, educate, and we're just here to entertain. So when you go back into the past, your modern companion has to make jokes about it, and that seems to be what we're stuck with. So at least Mark Gatiss is doing something different here by choosing an area of history which is questionably authentic. He can come at it from a different angle and push the rompiness further than usual, get more extreme jokes out of it.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to give Paul Murphy here also the credit for making that ridiculous sort of spoon versus sword fight kind of almost work.
It does, doesn't it?
Because it oughtn't to work because the Doctor is within sword range the whole time with his little spoon.
Yes.
But somehow they carry it off.
I was wondering that. Clever. So it seems entirely like the sort of thing a writer would think up, and the people who are charged with making it work visually would
Go, oh my God!
No, I don't think this is going to happen.
Yes.
You can dream this stuff, you can type this stuff, George, but you can't say it. You can't film it.
Yes.
Trevor Cooper there as
it's just a shame he doesn't get much to do. Yeah, that was one of the...
Well, joining a long list. It's kind of traditional now, isn't it, for actors from the old series making their curtain call in the new series. Trevor Cooper, Christopher Benjamin.
Yes.
Trevor Cooper's mate from Revelation of the Daleks, and so on and so on. Just nice to see them again.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, my only other thing I was going to say about this is I like the Clara's line where he says first Nottingham, then Derby, then Lincoln, and then she says, and then Worksop. It's a nice kind of Midlands joke, that, or East Midlands. Yeah.
Damn, I missed an opportunity for a plug there. Yeah. Damn it! I know my plugs always work so well. I should have, but I didn't think of it, and now it's too late. If I do it now, it'll fall flat on its face, won't it? Listeners, if you want more Trevor Cooper, go out and rush out to your local Big Finish stockist and buy the Paternoster Gang Volume 4. He's in the episode Merry Christmas, Mr. Jago, which I'm told the writing on and is particularly fine, and it has an excellent cast, including the aforementioned Christopher Benjamin and Trevor Cooper, and all of the Paternoster Gang.
It's receiving good reviews.
It is. Buy it for yourself for Christmas, and for a friend for Christmas, and then for another friend for Christmas. I don't necessarily stop there, but I think that should be the minimum of your purchases. Robot of Sherwood. Good title. It's got a pun in it.
Yes.
Kind of.
Well, only just. Does it fall into arachnids in the UK?
It's better.
It's better than that.
You see,
the pun. Yeah.
On a technical level,
well.
a technical level, arachnids in the UK should work fine. It's pretty, it's pretty good. On the technical level of sharing the two words that correlate to form the pun, share enough letters to make it work, but it doesn't work on any other level. Whereas Robot of Sherwood is quite funny and charming. It's a charming idea, the Robot of Sherwood.
Yeah, well, it is quite good, except that there isn't a Robot of Sherwood, except that it's the Sheriff of Nottingham, except that he isn't a robot.
It isn't. Apart from that, it kind of does it work in that it's intentionally misleading because we're supposed to think right from the beginning that it's Robin. Okay, good.
Yes.
Just checking. And it doesn't give the game away in the way that
No.
the Android invasion does.
Or,
Or indeed the
Androids
androids
in
of
the
Tara.
UK.
Yes. Indeed.
Brilliant. What links are there? Castles, pastiching,
Castles, romance, androids.
sword fights.
Yes.
They really
Sword
couldn't be
fights.
two more similar stories. We've
Robin,
excelled ourselves this time.
Robin gets his Marion. Reinhardt ends up with Strella, does he? I think so.
He does, yes. Yeah, definitely. There's a clinch at the end.
You've got a couple of nice standoffs as well. We've mentioned them both. Romana with Grendel and then Clara and the sheriff. The companion gets something nice to do.
Damn it, you've reminded me. I've moved on prematurely to the links section because you reminded me of something that both a plus and a minus for Robot of Sherwood that I forgot to mention.
Go on then.
Marion, I'd forgotten the plot. So I'd forgotten who this random young woman was. And all the way through, in fact, I'd forgotten she was in it when she disappears for a very long stretch and then reappears when the Doctor gets to the dungeons. And I was going to complain that this is another truncated subplot for Mark Gatiss, a bit like, not as heinous as in Victory of the Daleks, where the poor widowed Wren appears in one scene at the beginning, one scene at the end. But no, it's not much more than that. And I was going to say, it just feels like Gatiss always wants to have a more grounded subplot with some pathos and emotion in it to counterpoint the high camp elsewhere, but never puts much time into it or effort in. So not effort. There's plenty of effort, but not enough time. And whether or not he doesn't write that it gets pushed out at scripting stage, or whether it's script editing or filming or editing, I don't know. But I hadn't thought that she might be Marion, so that reveal at the very end came as a nice surprise to me and made me forgive the entire thing. Because again, I found that it was one of the two moments I found oddly moving, because it was unexpected, and perhaps if we'd got to know her better as a character, maybe I would have been tipped off, and that moment wouldn't have worked as well. Don't know. As you were.
Grendel and the sheriff both end up taking the plunge, although Grendel escapes and the sheriff doesn't.
You've literally carried straight on with the links. I wish I hadn't said all that now.
Yeah.
Is it time to bring this to a halt? Any final?
I think that's long since passed, but
yes.
We might as well.
Have we discussed the influence of other versions of the Robin Hood legend on Robot of Sherwood in terms of other depictions there?
Of course we haven't.
I'll allow you a couple of minutes on that if you've got something exciting to say.
I'm not sure. I've got a couple of minutes. I mean, the most obvious thing being Ben Miller is obviously something of a homage to the late great Alan Rickman there, isn't he? I think this is definitely taken from the same. The others, I guess, there's a bit. Well, we get an Errol Flynn reference, don't we, during the sword fight, I believe. And yes, the whole business with Alan Dale being willing to strike up his loot at a moment's notice. I'm trying to think there's one of those movies where it pastiches that, and I don't think it's as late as Robin Hood Men in Tights. I think, of that era. I think there's an earlier, at least a couple of earlier ones. And I guess this is after my time, but I guess there's a bit of Maid Marian and Merry Men kind of stuff going on in there as well.
Yes, I suppose so.
I think we're all too young
long in the
for that,
tooth.
really.
Yeah. Young.
Sorry, old for that. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
And on a more visual level, there's something that I'd completely forgotten, which I think caused quite a stir at the time. But I spotted it this time without actually looking for it, when the computer display in the spaceship is showing us evidence of the Doctor's contention. It's full of representations of Robin Hood from Earth, Myths and Legends. There's a shot of Patrick Troughton's Robin Hood, isn't there?
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah,
which is for a split second, and I think I didn't spot it the first time around, but I did this time because, of course, we've seen it now, 8
Yeah.
minutes of it on the Power of the Daleks DVD. So that was nice.
Conversely, I spotted it the first time around and missed it the second time. But anyway, okay. I was probably making.
You have to be
a dent or
contrary,
something.
don't you?
Okay, look, thanks both of you for coming along with your thoughts on those stories, and thanks to our listeners for sticking with us, if you have done. And look, if you enjoyed this episode, we've got lots more in our podcast feed, and
even if you didn't.
yeah, we've still got lots more. Yeah, and while we're delighted that so many people are listening to us already, we're always keen for the podcast to reach a wider audience. So if you have enjoyed it, please tell your friends. And indeed your enemies, and leave us some reviews on platforms like, for instance, Podchaser or Apple Podcasts. We've got a couple more episodes ideas for those that are in the works before Christmas. We'll come out with another live show, I'm sure. But in the meantime, goodbye for now.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. It's not that we're going out.
Anywhere.
Sorry, can you cut that bit out, Richard?
Sorry.
That's fine.
Can you cut that? Do I have to swear to make you cut it out?
Oh, I was going to say something and now I forgot what it was.
It went so quiet after I said it that I started to wonder if I'd missed something, if I'd been incredibly stupid. Do they call her Marion all the way through? Do we know that that's her?
I didn't.
I cannot remember whether or not her.
It felt like it was supposed to be a big surprise.
Yes, I can't remember whether her guardian at the start who gets himself killed has the whether he mentions her by name. Or
I'm assuming. It felt to me like it was supposed to be a big twist.
Unfortunately, I spoiled it for myself because I went to IMDb to check who the actress was as I was watching it, and it credited her as so and so's ward brackets Marion, and so that rather blew that for me.
No, she's not mentioned as Marion.
She isn't mentioned until right at the end.
Good. So you can cut that discussion out and just leave in my excellent bit.
So Marion is mentioned 5 times, the last of which is when he recognises the woman, and the other 4 times is Clara talking to Robin.
Okay. Yeah. Anyone would think you had the script up in front of you.
Funnily enough, it's the
Pirated
transcript anyway.
Pirated from BBC Miami.
Yeah.
What were they doing in Miami?
Okay, I think before it becomes impossible to edit this, I think that's probably enough. So
it's a long one, isn't it, mate?
How
do we get 2 hours out of that?
Well, he just kept talking, didn't stop, I think, fundamentally.
Oh, yeah, that's how it happens, isn't it?
Yeah.